continued, hopefully continued good stewardship of life. And also, as some younger people come in and join Matt in the back, I'm glad that it's not just older people here, because I think the time really to think most about legacy is when we're younger. Because if we wait till the very end, which I'll say in this session, when we wait till the very end, it may be a bit late to do a lot about it. Sort of like saving for retirement, not to bring up a really tough topic. But if you wait until you're ready to retire, it's a little bit late to start that process. And the same thing with legacy. What is a legacy? And I have a little definition here that actually is an AI definition I'm going to just admit. But I have AIs on my computer and it just pops up, when I ask questions. So anyway, I give AI some, an attribute here. Legacy generally refers to something transmitted or handed down from the past, often implying a lasting impact or influence. It can encompass material possessions, but more broadly refers to the impact a person or organization has had on future generations. This can include values, achievements, stories, or even a reputation. So in this little definition or reflection about legacy, what stands out to you there? What are some things, some words that might stand out to you, or things that you think are important about legacy? Okay. Okay. Sorry? Values, okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. Okay. Yeah.
But our things are no longer a legacy to the younger generation. Like when we were growing up, we wanted our grandmother's dishes and we wanted her quills, and now our things are no longer a legacy.
Yeah. I hear that so often. It's people my age that are lamenting that their children don't want, and dishes are the main thing. And that's the first thing that comes up. Yeah. They don't want my dishes. They don't want China. They don't want, and I'm kind of getting to this place where, I have closets or cabinets that I don't open for a year, or something. And then things that have been used for ages, and I'm like, really? Do I really need all of this? And so there's legitimacy there, but that stands for something, I think. I am of the belief that it stands for that younger people don't want our things as much as they want us. They want your time, your presence, your investment, hands-on investment in them. That's at least my take. That's what I'm learning from younger people these days. As you think about legacy, what ingredients, what does a ministry legacy mean? Does it mean to have a ministry legacy? Or what might it mean?
Upholding traditions.
Okay. Yeah.
Laying groundwork that is sustainable after you're gone.
Okay. Which I think we all try to do. And we all have probably observed that it's very hard to build things and it's very easy to tear them down. I drive around Waco sometimes and I see a building that was standing yesterday, and then one day later it's completely flooded. So it took days, months, maybe years to build, and it takes just a few minutes for it to come down. I've learned that in ministry, that it can take so long to build something, and you can leave, and then it can be gone very, very quickly.
So how do you?
Well, that's part of our topic today, is what do we do? Yeah. And there doesn't mean, that's not to say that some things might need to be torn down. Might need to be things different. I was sharing a story a few days ago. I can't even remember exactly with whom, but I was talking about times when we can realize that something else needed to happen after we're gone, but we wouldn't have been able to do that ourselves. That's not very well said. There was a church that I was in a number of years ago that at the time that I was there, it was a very effective ministry on all the metrics, and everybody would have said, oh, this is great. They were sad when I left. We had a great time, all this kind of stuff. I went back a number of years later, about 20 years later, and the ministry was completely different. I mean, it was as different could be. And I knew that because I kept up with them well all through the years. But what I realized was that who they are today is more accurate to their community. It serves the local people. It serves this inner city population. This church has really become the people around it rather than what I had my dream of it. And others, I wasn't the only one holding the dream. I realized that had I not moved from there, they wouldn't have gone to this next stage, and I would have been the person standing in the way of what I really could say, this is really who you need to be. So I think it's something I would encourage you to actually realize that maybe there are things that need to change about what we do, and we might not have been the best person to lead in some kinds of change. Now that's not to eliminate, to say that's always the case by any means. I've seen the opposite, and I've experienced it, but just to mention that. Yeah. Let's think, go ahead. Yeah. No, please.
One legacy that he struggles to leave behind, is, and any minister should, is to teach people what worship really is, because most people don't really understand that. They think it's either the music or coming on Sunday, and so that's a legacy you need to leave.
Yeah, those are the lasting things. Yeah, and the things people often, as you say, don't understand. The question, from whose legacy have you benefited? And I put some things down here: teachers, authors, composers, performers, conductors, worship leaders, ministers, parishioners, people with titles and positions, and people without them. So who are some leaders, some people from whom you have benefited? Think about that for a moment, and then let's share a little bit. I know we have so many, and I've jotted down a whole bunch of them, which if I were to tell you, you wouldn't know these people, but they're meaningful to me. But from whose legacy have you benefited? I'll start out by saying, many times when my father was alive, he's been gone for 7 years, but I would talk to my dad often about my life and my work, and we talked pretty much every day. And I would often tell him how discouraged I was and how much I felt overworked and was doing too many things and accepting too many responsibilities and what have you. And my dad would always say, but Randall, so many people have poured their life into yours, and you have a debt to pay. You have a responsibility to pay back. Well, that's debatable in some ways, not that I have a debt or a responsibility or an obligation, or even a duty, which is a word I hardly hear used anymore. It's kind of a dirty word in our world these days. But a duty to actually give back. But my dad was always reminding me about all the people who had invested in me, and then what I took from that. So in that context, just without sharing a whole long story, there's some people that have influenced your life.
I would say in general, worship leader peers that you get together with and share things back and forth, and what works, what doesn't work, that kind of thing. It kind of shapes you throughout your ministry.
I would say an English teacher I had in high school who was also a musician. He saw potential in me and gave me experiences to broaden my vision of music and of what I could be. And that's had a profound impact on my life, throughout my life.
I thought similarly, Mark. My high school band director is a person who I carry with me every day. It's incredibly important to me. And my second grade teacher, who saw some potential in me. Now, how did I know that? find those somewhere in my stuff still. Because I loved her and I admired her, and their church had order, and ours, we didn't have anything printed. We were just completely the Sunday morning spontaneous church. But
Did you ever tell her how?
I did. She's deceased, and that's been when she lived long, but I
That
did.
means so much.
We kept up until her death.
Well, you know, how much that meant to her, when you know you're making somebody that, we don't think that, I thought, well, I did teach high school, then elementary music for a long time, and preschool music at church, and kids here and there, you know, and then when they come back and you see them much later, and they recognize you and all your things, you know, and they say, wow, you did this, oh, that lady, you never know.
You never know. So,
My, children's choir leader, when I was, in elementary school, was at one time, who also directed the music for choir, the adult choir. They did not let her lead worship, because she was one that I remember growing up on, and she just a few things that she said to me that just pointed me toward, you can do this, it was amazing.
So my voice teacher at college had a really strong impact on me because she helped me to believe that I was something worth. I went into that voice class thinking, but she helped me. Of course, anybody who's been in a voice studio knows that it's a very personal thing. Lots of tears are shed in there, but she really helped me understand, okay, maybe I do have something that I can do and offer to people. So, and also the seminary, Miller, Price, and Don Husted, both of those guys were strong and consistent.
as they were aligned, I was not even their student. But I came to know them, and they had Christ still.
Well, our churches have changed, society changes, but I think what we're talking about, identifying people that God puts in your path that you can influence and help them develop their potential, then you're really leaving a legacy for those people.
That's right. Yeah, the legacy is not really yours. You don't control your legacy. You have an influence in the legacy, but you don't control it. It's the people after you that actually, that's Mark beautifully pointed out.
You will leave a legacy.
Yeah, that's right. That is the legacy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is the legacy. Well, we could go on, and I don't want us to take the whole hours telling stories, although I would personally enjoy just sitting around telling stories. But I do want us to talk about a few other things, but some things that I would recognize, and just a few little anecdotes that we've shared, is these are not always somebody famous. It's not always somebody that everybody else knows, but it's somebody that had a personal touch, somebody who invested in us personally, and they oftentimes didn't really know, might not have known that they did what they did, and yet it happened, and it was important. So while we can know something about our legacy, we can't really be the evaluator of the legacy. And if we were, that might be a little bit creepy, or a little bit wrong, actually, maybe, or misguided. Is preparing to leave a legacy arrogant, or is it good stewardship? So kind of the question I was just alluding to. I think sometimes we believe that if I were to say, I want to leave a legacy, or it is very important to me that I have a legacy, then that might say that I was being arrogant, or I was being presumptuous, that I would have something to offer, or that my life would matter, or what have you. Well, I understand that, and I agree with that. And on the other hand, without being intentional, oftentimes we become unintentional, and we don't do anything. So I think there's this fine line between knowing that what we do matters to other people, and it might be taken into the future, and then also being incredibly humble about that. So there's this fine line. I have learned to see legacy as stewardship. That everything we do is, every gift we have, everything we can offer has the potential, it is something that we have a gift, therefore we are to use it well. Like my father was pointing out to me, you have been given all of these things, use them well. Use them, yes, use them well. My late wife and I decided about 15, almost 20 years ago now, that we wanted to be at this magical age at the time, which seems so distant, of 65. We were at a decision point in our life where we decided that we didn't want to be 65 years old and say, I wish we'd gotten out there and done more. That we wanted to say, we jumped out there on a certain instance, and we went the second mile on this. We made good of it. It was really whether or not I would continue to do part-time music ministry in addition to my other work. That was where it came down to. And it was really going back to a congregation that had been very difficult and a very tough time for us, and deciding that we would rather go back there and go through a process of reconciliation with people with whom there were differences, and we would live out reconciliation, or we would sit safely over here and never deal with that part of our life. And we decided that we didn't want to be, say, I wish we had, or what if we had. Not realizing that a few years later she would be ill, and that she would pass away, and that very congregation would be life-sustaining for us. And not realizing things that would happen in our family that would need those people who knew us and were willing to invest in our lives. So that's what I'm talking about later. We'll talk about being intentional about your legacy. If you did not intend to make an impact through your life, why did you choose to be a minister? That occurred to me as I was thinking about this topic in the last couple of months. That if you didn't plan to make an impact, then why would you even be a minister to begin with? Because what ministers do, we hope, is make an impact. So you are called to make an impact. You are called to leave a legacy, in a sense. I think I have begun to believe, through the process of reflecting on this topic, that it is a part of our calling to leave a legacy. That we don't really have that choice. And then the third thing I mentioned here, exercising your leadership capacity is your calling. And I think all of this is a part of calling. I grew up in an environment where I was always warned, sort of pulled back from, be sure you're not taking over here, or be sure you're not being too aggressive with yourself or leadership or something like that. And I think for me, as a type A guy, that was probably a really good warning. Again, it came from my parents mostly. My dad, who was my great mentor, was probably a good warning. But it also made me sometimes be afraid that my desire to be a leader was too much, or not really the right thing. It was my high school band director who said, you are a leader. People follow you. People want to be on your team. When you say, let's do something, let's go do this, your friends will often follow you. He was the first person that ever pointed that out to me. I had always been sort of made to believe, or picked up somehow, that sort of leader potential was kind of a little bit tainted or something. It was not a good thing. I try to tell my students all the time that if you like to be a leader and you want to lead people and you like to be in charge, then yay for you. Good, we need you. The world needs you. We need those people who want to lead. And when you have that calling and that desire in you, now let's use it well, and let's use it without all the things we see in our world where leadership is very poorly used, but let's use it well. And so I think that's one of the things that we need to, if you've dealt with that, and then it's holding about legacy. desiring to leave a legacy is a good thing, and it's something that we want to foster rather than feel like if I were to do that, somehow I'm, on an ego trip or something like that. Sustainable ministries are built on healthy long-term strategies with authentic relationships and intentional programming. And then these are the things that leave a legacy. Healthy long-term strategies with authentic relationships. So that's a pretty packed statement. Authentic relationships, long-term strategies, and intentional programming. So all of those things are part of leaving that legacy. Now, is it possible that you might do all those things and then still your legacy, as you perceive your legacy, it might go belly up? That could be. But I've also been a part of ministry long enough to know that sometimes when you think that your legacy was depleted or wiped away or whatever, no, that wasn't true at all. I have been in churches, a number of churches throughout my ministry, and I've been in churches where if you were to go there now, you would see very little of my imprint, if anything, after 20, 30, 40 years. You would see very little of anything, unless you talk to the people. Yeah. But you wouldn't be able just to talk to the people that are there, right? You need to talk to the people who've gone on, and the people who have gone on here, and then what have those people done, and then how's their legacy?
Planting seeds.
It's planting seeds. Thank you. It's planting seeds, and the overused but true, we plant seeds, we plant trees that we might never sit under. See? And while we want to be good stewards of our legacy, at the same time, if we go around trying to count up the legacy, you will always feel not enough, probably. Or you might overdo, you might count it too much. I don't know about you, but I know several of you that are retirement kind of age people in here. I'm just guessing by your hair color and because I know you. But one of the things that I do every quarter is I get my statement from my various accounts, and then I add it all up and see what is my net worth compared to last quarter. And then oftentimes then I look back and see what was it a year ago, and what was it 2 years ago, and where am I now, and how's that looking, and and all that. Now that sounds like a very weird thing for some of you probably, but it is something that I do. This was the end of the quarter just a few weeks ago, a few days ago, so I was doing that little process. I don't do the same thing with a legacy. I don't sit around and think, how many people have I influenced, let me add it and stuff, and I've got this number, and I've got an ongoing list, and I keep it from year to year. That's something I've never, ever done. But when people say something, or I receive a kind note in the mail, or on those moments when there's something dropped along, then I'm aware of it. So it's not quite the same that we keep it, but it also does add up in some way, just to mention that. Not sure what that means, but I've been thinking about that, about financial legacy and many other kinds of legacies, which we'll talk about in a while. Why would you want to leave a legacy? It's a good stewardship of your calling, which we mentioned, and it has the potential to affect time beyond your active years and after your death. Beyond your active years, which would be the years when you're, hope God will have active years for a long, long, long time, but sometimes we use the word active years to mean your employed years, which is not quite the same as your active years. And when I've mentioned just a couple people that have been that left important legacy for me, both of the people I mentioned have been gone a long, long time. And both of those people, my day-to-day encounter with them, one was 2 years and one was 3 years. talking about parent, well, I was talking about my dad as the person who left a great legacy. But we also are talking about periods of time that then influenced something else. It wasn't about what was built, but it was about what was built inside a person, or instilled, or passed along in some way or other.
Most people want to make a difference. They just want to make a difference in the world.
Yes.
Whatever that is, whatever God has for you.
That's right. That's
How
right.
do you make a difference?
That's right. And I do mention, when we get these notes and stuff, if you've received those kind of things, that's really beautiful. I received one just recently from a former person in men's choir. And oftentimes they're from the people that you thought weren't paying any attention at all. And sometimes from the person who was just there for a very little bit of time. And that was the experience I had just a couple of weeks ago, where I had a student that had very little, and he was even saying, you might not remember me, I was this. I actually did remember. I'm pretty good about that, but oftentimes it's short-lived. So thinking about the day-to-day interactions are also important. If we don't intend to leave a legacy, the possibility that we will leave one will be diminished. So I think the fact that you intend to leave a legacy and have some intentionality about that is very important. Most of the time, if we don't intend to do something, the chance of it happening is not very good. So imagining the end, beginning with the end in mind. I'm sure a lot of you have read Stephen Covey's long, around for a long time now, book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I still have an undergrad class to read that book because I still think it's important. And I think almost every leadership book that's out there in some ways refers, just assumes you know what it means to begin with the end in mind. But what does Covey mean by begin with the end in mind? Who remembers that? You don't have to, but anybody remember that?
Isn't it shooting for something? Because if you don't shoot for what you're trying to get to,
Yeah.
you probably will never make it there.
Exactly, yeah, that's right. It actually is an exercise of pretending that you're at your own funeral. That's what the exercise is about, is imagining your own funeral. And what are people going to say? And what would you like for them to say? And then what are you going to do today so that at the end, these things actually match up? They actually match up. That can be kind of a morbid thing, or it can seem like an ego trip to seem like a lot of things. But I found it to be important. Also, I've had enough death in my life to realize death is real, and funerals are real, and somebody is going to say something. And thinking about who's going to, as my uncle said one time, speak up for me at the end. It's something to think about. One of my, it's actually a distant cousin, but he was at our house after my dad died, and he said, I don't know, Don's gone now, I don't know if anybody's going to speak up for me at my funeral. And what he meant was, I don't know anybody that saw good in me other than your dad. He was a guy that a lot of people didn't think well of. But that's what he was hoping, that my dad would be the one that could say something nice about it at the end. I've also come to believe that we all deserve somebody to say something good about us at the end. And back in our little community back home, where I grew up in Alabama, I had done that role in the funerals now for all of my mother's sisters. And I've been the one that has spoken up for them. So now there's people in the community who say, well, I want you to talk at my funeral. What do they mean by that? So I want somebody that was looking at my life, that noticed really who am I? Who am I, and what is there underneath what I do that most people might not have seen and been able to call out? Yeah.
It's really the person who speaks, because those who want to speak are not most likely there.
So that's what the cubby experience is like. So I encourage you to spend some time. Don't do it every day, but every once in a while, it's worth thinking about. I think it's also listening carefully to people with whom you have conversations. What do people say about you? What do they drop in passing? And sometimes it's what they don't say about you. So I think when we're having conversations, back to the pastoral care session that I did yesterday, our conversations with people are important by what they say and in what they don't say. Sometimes the thing that nobody ever says that you think you wish they would say, it might mean that you're not doing it as much as you think you are. That it's not as real as you wish it were. Just to say, I noticed that a lot. But listen carefully to conversations and you'll start to pick up a little bit about what your life is really meaning to people. Having the courage to ask other people. And I think it's very rare that a person actually is able to say, what do you think is my legacy? What do you think? What do you think I'm worth? Am I worth something? Have I given something that matters? Have I really done anything that was important? I think to have somebody be able to reflect on that for you. There's people in this room that I have done that with. I've often shared with Mark Green, who's right here, how much his life is meaning to the life of my daughter who works with him at church. And he is leaving an incredibly strong footprint in her life, which I hear about much. I've talked to Dodie about the life that she's lived and how important she's been to, and I won't mention names, but people that we both know that carry her legacy. And others in the room, I've spoken with you about what you've left, and I think that's important. I also think it's good to, just in passing, I'll say, it's good to, as I was told as a kid, to give flowers while people are alive. If you know what that Southern expression means, it's share the good about people while you're still able to share. I have not understood in my life why we think we should withhold good things from people. I do not see anything valuable about withholding unless, as again, I was always told, you're going to get the big head. You know, which seems to be sometimes a horrible thing.
That's how you love on people.
Well, I agree.
I
But
think we should have
anyway.
people's funerals before they're
Yeah, and sometimes we, have any of you seen the movie Saving Private Ryan?
Mm-hmm.
It's one of my favorite movies. It's one of the most difficult movies to watch, but it's one that I do watch every once in a while. I have been so moved by the scene at the end when Private Ryan goes back to Normandy. And what does he say there? As he's going, what does he say at that moment? Do you want to remember any of that script? Mike, what does he say at the end?
Tell me I've lived a good life. Tell me I've been a good man.
Tell me I've been a good man. Tell me something mattered. Yeah. And he's crying and he's just saying, to his family, to his family, I believe. Yeah. Tell me I've been a good man. Yeah. I think that's the cry that we all have at the end. That's the thing we all want to hear at the end. Don't wait until the end to decide you want to leave something of value. We kind of started off with that. To stay on track, regularly assess what you are doing that matters most. Now, I'm not talking about this list of whom I influencing, but the whole idea of what is most important in my life right now. And I think that changes in every time in our life. For instance, there was a moment about 30 years ago that I was feeling as if I had done pretty much everything I could do in the place that I was at the time, kind of the institution I was in. I pushed this envelope and there was nothing to go. I did this, all these things. And so I kind of thought, I don't know anything new to do. So then I was challenged to say, so what am I doing that matters most? In what parts of my life am I making the greatest influence and have the greatest potential for long-term good? And I came up with two things. Those things at the time, it was the youth choir at the church, and it was the choir that I was conducting at school. And I thought those are the two places where change is most likely really making a big difference. So I decided to put my greatest energy into those two things. So I mean, I just poured my heart into that because that was the potential. That's the sort of assessment I'm talking about, is where does it matter? And then what are all the things that you're doing that matter almost not at all? Which for my life can be a whole bunch of things because I have a lot of sometimes institutional things that I have to do that I don't believe are, as Anne Ortland says in her book, are making people's hearts beat faster for the cause of Christ. She says that about making announcements in church. Announcements are the one thing that makes nobody's heart beat faster and creates fervor for Christ. So I always think about that. But anyway, she says it about that, but I often think about it in other things that I'm doing. So my goal is to do those things very quickly and then get on over here to the other thing that matters so much more. What one thing did God create you to do on the earth? There's a Parker Palmer book, and some of you may have to help me remember the title. I'll think of it in a minute. It was a small little book, and I've read it now about 3 times, and I'm not being helpful to you because I'm not reading the title, but it's very much worth reading, and I'll think of it before the end of the session. But the big question that the book asks is, what one thing did God put you on the earth to do? So that's a really hard question. It's a really big question. But every time when I've been at a turning point in my life, like, do I go this way or do I go that way? Two roads diverged in the Alleluia or whatever. That moment, I've read that book in the last 20 years several times, and tried to ask that question. I will just share something that happened to me in the process of that. In a big moment a few years ago of a decision that I had to make, I told my son I was going to be doing this, applying for this other position. And my son said, "Oh, Dad, you can't do that. There's no way. What about the church? And what about the Vagrant Men's Club?" I said, "You can't do that." And then I said, "Well, sometimes we're called to do different things." And I said, "Isaac, what do you think of the most important thing I'm created to do? What was I put on the earth to do?" And Isaac paused a minute and he said, "I think you were put on the earth to build things and to take things that are broken and mend them." And then he said, "I think that other job would be perfect for you." So and he was a high school student at the time, but he was the one that gave me the greatest insight. And so I still think he hit my life right. I think I was put on the earth to build things and take things that were hopeless, so broken that you can't see the form anymore, and try to bring some life back. No, but that's a good one too.
So let your life speak.
Let your life speak. That's it. Yeah. Go by the little "let your life speak." I've given it away now probably 20 times to different people too. It's a really good book. Parker Palmer is a person that I would like to read a lot. But anyway, what were you made for? So as I have been really grappling with retirement, I've been asking myself, so what are you going to build now? So what are you going to fix now? What is in the future for you to deal with? And I don't know the answer to that, but I didn't know the answer to that 50 years ago when I was saying, God, what do you want me to do?
Ask God.
Yeah, yes. Well, I do offer myself to a lot of feedback. And I try to hear from other people because I'm always listening. I'm always listening, I think. To you, many of your close friends of mine. It's an important question. So let's think now, what are some kinds of legacies that there are? There are financial legacies and material things, foundations, scholarships, endowments, nonprofits, and all of those things. I wrote out beside this, why should we feel compelled to leave all to our children? My children kid me all the time and say, Dad, I know you're not going to leave anything to us. You're going to give everything to children in Africa, and they're not kidding. And they say, we're not counting on anything from you. And some of that's true. I will give them something, but it won't be nearly everything I could give them. And I ask you to think about that too. Do we owe everything that we have to our family? Or is there a point where your financial means would be a hindrance to other people? And then where is that line, and then where do you need to go in terms of giving to other people and to other causes and setting up a scholarship or something like that? All these other things. Scholarships can be set up with $5,000 a year for 10 years, things like that, which is very doable for a lot of people. Just to mention, not just scholarships, but there are many other things. And so that's a question that I have often asked, is sometimes we only think that we are preparing our future, our legacy for our children or our family.
But the legacy for your children should be the roots you've given them, not your money.
That's right. Right. It should be you, your own self, not just your financial.
Or your dishes.
Yeah, or your dishes, that's right. Or your crystal, or the stuff that has to be polished, right? Which nobody wants. Yeah. I have a friend who does estate sales. And he asked me a few weeks ago, I was in Alabama where my mother lives. He asked me to go with him to assess an estate sale that somebody was wanting me to do. And this person has lots of artwork, which is the strangest thing in rural South Alabama. And so we went in this very, very, very hot barn, and for over an hour, we watched this guy show us some artwork that might be really valuable, or it might not be valuable at all. I don't know. And then we went and watched him show us all these dishes and all of this stuff. And my friend was just saying, he finally said, I probably will have to give those away at the end. But the guy was saying, this is this, and this is this, and this is worth a lot of money, and this, and he was just
worth a lot of money to him, but maybe
and
not
that's
to
right.
everyone
If
else.
it's worth a lot of money, why are you giving it away? But anyway, just the interesting thing. But I also, it reiterated the fact that you never know what's in someone's mind, which I was so surprised. I'm talking like contemporary art and all kinds of things in a barn and not even on a main road. I'm talking really in the city. Yeah. So he was having it was all being assessed by somebody. So I don't know what the assessment was. But my friend told him, the guy that will assess this will not come to this hot barn, I promise you. If you want to relocate, he might come and look, but he's not going to come to this place. So another kind of legacy, those whose life has been impacted or influenced by your ministry, and we've talked about that quite a lot. Another is programs and ministries. The work that you are doing, the program that you're doing, the things that you've established, all of those things that we work so hard to do. But I do encourage you to be aware that those things can also come down quickly, as we've also discussed. The first time it happened to me, I was shocked. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that everybody didn't value it as much as I had. But much of what we do is temporal. For some, it could be written materials and artifacts, so a body of work. For some people, that can be that. I have some books that I've written, and what do I do with those? And do I continue to revise them? Do I give them to other people to revise? I don't know yet what I'm going to do with some of that. Families and children, so that's another legacy. So a family history. About 3 weeks ago, I was at the small motor shop in Opp, Alabama, which is close to where my mother lives. And I was having a new blade put on a weed eater and the chainsaw some work done on the chainsaw. This guy came in that I thought, I know I recognized the guy, but I couldn't call his name. So he told me, he said, oh, Randall, I'm so-and-so. It turns out I knew him well, I knew him, I just couldn't call him. Anyway, he started talking to me, and then he started telling everybody in the small machine shop, started telling them about some of the work that I was doing in Pharaoh. But then he started saying, well, who you really needed to know was his dad. And he said, I had the opportunity to visit his dad a number of times, and he started talking about how wise my dad was, and what a sweet lady my mom was, and how they were stalwart people in our community, and how, all of this. Well, my dad's been gone a long time. My dad was ill and feeble for a number of years before that. So it just reminded me that my dad would have never known that he had any influence on this guy. He didn't even know him that well. He was in their church as a youth minister for just a little bit of time. But he was influenced by my parents. I was realizing that I was going to be talking about legacy, and I thought, no, this is legacy. This is legacy. Years later, what's somebody going to say about you at the lawnmower store? So, and that's funny, but it's not. It's true.
It's the truth.
It's the truth. Wherever people are going to meet up, what are they going to say about you? Well, I was, almost in tears. My dad, who was the epitome of humility, never assumed anything. So, a family history. Anyway, he just kept talking about what a great family I was from. And basically, he said rightly, it's not about him, it's about where he came from. See, which was exactly true, which made me much happier. Program legacies. Some program that we lead, some of you are part of things like that. A successful business could be a legacy, a living legacy, somewhere like scholarships and things like that. A reputation was also a part of the legacy, which was part of what I was talking about. And I wrote in my notes that a financial legacy should not be a thing which we are unwilling to share. So sometimes we feel like if I were to say that I have a financial legacy to live, or I have money for this or this, that would sound boastful, when it might not be boastful at all, it just is. So I've done a lot of work in the last number of years in helping people to establish scholarships, helping a man to give a $6 million gift to the church music area at Baylor, which is part of why you're able to enjoy this conference with different upgrades than it had when some of you started attending many years ago, because of some of those kinds of things. But what I have realized is that the people that have legacy, financial legacy to offer, are looking for some place to use that well. And if they can share their vision and be a part of that vision, then you are actually giving those people a gift. And I say that to you because some of you may be the people who have that, but some of you also are the people who know those people. And sometimes the other part of that is I've tried to be a steward of in the last very few years is trying to share with my students how you might get to the place to actually have a financial legacy. Because nobody was willing to share that with me when I was younger. There was a person that some of us, a couple of you in here knew that was had a financial legacy. I thought at the time that we were in our 20s. And I wanted to be a person like that. And I reached out to this person more than once and basically said, would you mentor me? Would you give me some help about how it is that a person builds financial independence in their life? And he was never willing to say anything to me but just save your money. Well, how do you start? How do you what do you do with that money? I knew it was not all more complicated than that, but it was more complicated than that. So I'm trying to be transparent with my students about if you're interested in those kind of things, I could help you. And I would be willing to try to help you or point you to people who are doing that well. But that's something else that I think is also part of your legacy and something that you might consider sharing with some younger person is, if I could offer some advice about this, here are some ways that I'm able to retire, or some ways that this could happen, or some ways that I've been able to be generous, I've been able to do these things. Because it is a very heartwarming gift when you can give things away. And my late wife and I had the belief that we had been given so much, and so many people had invested in our lives so beautifully, and it was our deep hope that there would be a time where we could offer some of those things to other people. And that time did come, and for which I'm grateful. The last thing, consider we can prepare to leave a legacy, but the true measure of our legacy is determined by those who come behind us. So while we prepare for the legacy, we are not the ones that fully determine the legacy. Those behind us will be the ones to actually carry forward that legacy. So when it comes down to programs, things, what have you, my encouragement is you invest in people. Your greatest legacy, I believe, will be in the people that come after you more than in the things you leave, which some of you are discovering with your dishes. Yeah. They might not even be welcome. And then the last thing I mentioned is, what do we do at the crossroad? When our decisions often count the most, what do we do in those moments? And I encourage you, and I encourage me, to know when we're at a crossroads. When are some of those times that you might be at a crossroads?
When you're trying to decide when to retire.
The hardest one, I think. Grant, what do you think?
When there's a major life transition, new family members, different jobs.
Yeah. I always want, I know she what Grant says. Exactly. Those times, those are big crossroads. I do think that you're right about the retirement thing. I believe that retirement is a lot harder to decide than what I want to do with my life when I'm 22. Because really, the choice you have over what I want to do with my life at 22 is pretty small. It's really a lot left up to what other people do and the opportunities they offer you. But the decision to retire is, you get to make that choice. And that's the hardest part about it, is you get to make it. If I don't want anybody else to make it for me. That's why I'm making it now, rather than waiting till they all say, get him out of here, please, take it. That's the reason. But still, something to think about, this crossroads thing. I think that, the last thing I was going to share was about my dad and this small engine shop, which I already shared. But what questions, we've got 5 minutes here or so, questions, comments, reflections that you might have about comments or questions you might have. All right, well, thank you so much for being a part of this time today, and I hope that there's been some things that caused you to think and to reflect and to, for us all to be on a trajectory of living our best life. You hear that a lot.